Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Ian Carter, Chairman of the States of Alderney Policy and Finance Committee, and as such, our Chief Minister. Today, we're going to have a look at 2022. Good to see you, Ian. Thank you for
Hello,
sparing me some
Tony.
time.
That's
Really
that's
appreciate
fine.
it.
Delighted to.
Can we start off with governance? Because there appears to be total public apathy on the island. We've had 6 seats on offer in the last couple of months, and only 5 have got in by way of walkover. Have you got any idea why this is happening?
I don't know whether it's apathy or perhaps for some people fear of responsibility, being held accountable, public scrutiny, invasiveness. I mean, I think at times perhaps the coverage in our very small press and on social media, people can get they look at that and they sort of think to themselves, do I want to be in that sort of sphere? And say not. But equally, there are a lot of challenges, and maybe people feel that leave it to others. But when you do leave it to others, unfortunately, if the others aren't there, we get what we've just been through, where we don't have sufficient people to take on that responsibility. And maybe public service just doesn't have that attractiveness anymore.
I mean, it was disappointing to lose the 3 younger members, wasn't it?
Well, certainly. Any to try and get that spread across the community for different people with different perspectives for age is always going to be disappointing, because we are then in that potential position, as you say, of having retirees or people who have time to do this. And that is not helpful in terms of that bigger picture and perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, should you be thinking in terms of increasing the allowance? Because clearly a youngster can't afford to dedicate themselves to the States of Alderney, but possibly if they got a little bit more money out of it, you might find that you could attract some people.
I think it's a real bind position. If you increase the allowance, then there would no doubt be a chorus of naysayers who will say that that's not the right thing. I think we do have this problem of being a jurisdiction that is comparatively small, but then does though have these demands on us that are in effect out of proportion to the size of this that we are. And that is really difficult. I mean, obviously in the past, maybe it's been the case that there's been less on our plate, so to speak, and so people have been able to give that time because there's less time demanded. But I mean, I look at it, what we're asked to do, and there's a tremendous amount. I don't think we're generating work. It is things that we're having to make decisions on to get things done, and then arguably we don't get things done because we haven't maybe got sufficient focus nor prioritization to say, right, we can only just do this, and we haven't got the civil service to support that, so we actually then to some extent start to flounder.
Are you actually curate with only 9 on board?
Yeah, that's fine. You can make decisions on at the States meeting with 9. In fact, I think that the quorum at the States meetings on the law of Alderney 2004 is actually, I think it's 5, to be honest. But you do have to. 10 people is obviously what is designed for, and 10 is what we want. I mean, again, several people have spoken to me about potentially standing in what will be a by-election in the new year. So I'm hopeful that there will be a true election, if we can put it that way, in the new year.
Do you think that possibly part of the apathy is due to the fact that we were promised government reform? You were going to have a debate, the States, in September, which never took place. You then suddenly come up to us with an election, the biannual election, where you're asking people to stand for 5 years and immediately destroying the concept of getting it sorted by the end of 2024.
it's actually a 4-year term that people are elected for.
Yeah, sorry.
And
but it should have been 2.
That sort of time constraint, because we had this concept of herder was raised. It has been delayed. It's not something that I'm particularly, proud of that's happened, but that is where we are, and you could argue that is part of the either the problem or the joy of having every 2 years 5 new people, that provides that sort of challenge. But there will be, even with new people coming in, the governance group will put forward proposals in the new year that it's worked on over those 2 years.
But Ian, effectively, you're now stuck to 2026, aren't you?
I think to be realistic, I think yes. I mean, you anything can be moved forward quickly with a will, but I think
there won't be a will.
To be realistic, no, it's
Okay.
not going to be.
Now, bearing in mind Lord Keane's requirements, are we actually complying with those? Have you had a chance to revise on that? I mean, basically, Ireland's government has sufficient capacity and access to the necessary skills, knowledge and experience to govern effectively. Government decisions are made in a transparent way based on objective advice, and a proper democratic accountability of the government to the people of the island can be maintained primarily through periodic contested elections. Do we tick those boxes?
Well, I think we if you go back 2 years, obviously the last election there was a contested election, 6 people standing for 5, which was not, which compared to the previous 2 years before that, I think it was 13. So there's been a diminution of numbers standing, but we still had the election. We have got an election for the States of Guernsey, 2 representatives, so there is choice there. Certainly, I would be looking, as I say, for the by-election that we have in the new year, that is contested. That brings us back to Lord Keane's sort of concept of elections being necessary, as a predetermined of that democracy that we're trying to take forward.
Do you think that you are, as a government, showing your decisions in a transparent way at the present time?
Well, interesting enough, we opened up the P&F meetings to the general public. Not one member of the public came to any meeting. So we've tried to so transparency was this trial period of 6 months we've gone through, and only members of the press came along. So whether this concept of transparency, what one person's interpretation is compared to another, I'm not sure, but the community didn't want to, and likewise GSC opened up their meetings. It doesn't appear that we're doing things where people could see how we came to decisions, but people don't want to, well, it would appear, don't want to attend that sort of meeting. They do come to the people's meeting and are particularly keen on the sort of second half of it where they can raise any issue. But again, that is obviously a discursive meeting rather than just seeing how decisions are made.
Coming back to Lord Keane's report, the Ministry of Justice are presumably looking at what's going on, are they?
They certainly, there's I think the President and the Chief Executive have a sort of Teams meeting on a sort of fairly regular basis. I'm not sure whether it's monthly or weekly. I think it's probably averages out as fortnightly. I'm not aware that there's any concerns have been expressed, certainly not to me, from either the Chief Executive or the President.
But theoretically, if things did get bad, the MOJ could take over and put commissioners in, couldn't they?
I think that before you got to that stage, actually, the MOJ looked to Guernsey as the sort of responsible big brother, if we can put it in that way, that they would be looking to Guernsey to be helping address whatever the issue was. I mean, I think you're probably going to ask me a little bit later about health provision on the islands. Now that primary health provision, that has been addressed through a lot of help from Guernsey in putting in place provision. I think if Guernsey had just stepped away for whatever reason, and I certainly wouldn't expect them to, because it's a transferred service apart from primary health and ambulance. If they'd stepped away, then I think there would have been pressure placed upon States of Guernsey before it being, commissioners being potentially put in place.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, what about this Guernsey deficit? States of Guernsey say £80 million short. The GPEG, the Guernsey Policy and Economic Group, who have got some pretty impressive people on board, put it more likely at £220 million, not 80, 220. That's a hell of a difference, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think perhaps the policy letter that's being issued today for the tax proposals may start to raise a few more questions about that 80, I think it's 84 million they came up with as an initial figure that Guernsey states. When again we put lots of economists in the same room, they can always come up with different answers.
Of course,
but I don't think necessarily that and as you say, the GPEG have some very, very able people there. I think I'll be more interested to see how the reaction is to the Guernsey States policy letter in terms of addressing the gap than perhaps that just statistical difference.
Because, I mean, a lot of people will say Guernsey and Alderney have not got proper accounting procedures, and go on to say, well, you always conveniently forget the staff pension scheme deficit, which in Guernsey's case is £1.6 billion. And I don't know how much the Alderney one is, but I would suspect around about 4 million, something like that. And that's money that's gonna, those chickens are gonna come home to roost. And when those pensions run out of funding, it's all going to go on general taxation. It's a big, big problem, and no one seems to take it on board. The only person I ever dealt with on the States was Robert McDowell. He understood it. He did something about it. But nevertheless, it's the elephant, and in both cases, the major elephant in the room that is conveniently ignored.
I certainly agree with you. I think it was 2010, I believe, in Guernsey, there was a commitment to move to international accounting processes, procedures. And that seems to have stalled completely. And for us to, in effect, go outside and say, go off on our own on that, would be potentially a difficulty because of the fiscal union. I can certainly, and do talk to, say, Mark Hellier, who is in effect, the Treasury lead on the States.
The Chancellor.
And sort of you talk to him about it, and there is certainly acknowledgement that this is certainly something that needs to be taken forward. But I'm not certain that the momentum nor the will is there to do so. Now, if I just simply said, "Oh, we're going to do this," I don't think I'd get necessarily support from my colleagues, nor necessarily support from Guernsey. And in the end, that problem, as you say, is an elephant in the room. It's one that does need to be addressed in both islands, but effectively, Guernsey are the lead on this. Now, as I say, I don't think as an individual, it will actually by making a stand, if you like, on that would actually help Alderney at the moment.
No. But you can't disregard these things, Ian. And that staff pension scheme for the Alderney civil servants is on your books, and will ultimately come and bite the States of Alderney, and in due course us as taxpayers, because you can't get out of the guarantees you've given to those people, and they've got to be paid. And if you the States of Alderney haven't got the money, well, it's going to fall back on us. Let's move on to the.
Can I just add one thing on that, Tony? I mean, obviously the pension scheme is actively managed, and certainly those that are and the professionals who do that have obviously this year had a pretty torrid time, as all pension schemes have. and certainly we have ongoing meetings, regular meetings and it's not for us they are the professionals who will give strategies
Sure.
in order to maximize return,
Yeah.
to ensure that the taxpayer in the end doesn't pay, and so they are doing their very best with the guidance that they can give us. And it's not for me to say, oh, we must invest in X or Y, because that's not
No. I'm not suggesting that for one moment. What I am suggesting is, if you start off with a low base figure, which is what you've got here,
yeah.
Even Bernie Madoff,
Tom's a man, yeah.
if you've been there for a short enough time, nobody can. There's no magic money tree. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I'm sure your investment professionals will do the best, but they're not going to make up the sort of deficit that you've got here. But there we go. Can we get on to the airport and this question of the £3.5 million contribution? Have you actually got a term laid out, over how many years and interest rates and everything else, if it goes ahead?
It was certainly, again, the financial strategists that we use, looking at the Guernsey bond, we're looking at 22 years, which is the current length of time which it has to run, with a rate with the percentage figures of around 3.2% roughly. And they gave those feedback figures, which were all in the billet for people to see. It is obviously, it was a decision that we made, I think, certainly not in haste. There's a great deal of discussion over this, as to simply, if we were perceived, if you like, as just receiving an airport or the funding for an airport, would that be as positive as showing that there was our own investment in infrastructure from the States of Alderney for the next 20 years? And that was the basis on which that decision was made, that there was a commitment to our infrastructure for the next 20 years.
Yeah, okay. But obviously, you've got to pay back capital and interest on this, haven't you, over the time? And so you would hope that it would be cleared within 20 years.
22-year term But again, all of that is predicated on it being agreed, and then there's a secondary, I suppose, filter there, in that States of Alderney, if it spends anything more than 250,000 or makes a commitment, I believe, for more than 250,000, that then has to go through the P&R committee in Guernsey. So affordability they would look at as well. So effectively, that contribution could be modified. I mean, you're in hypotheticals there a long way down the line, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, some people might argue that Guernsey are giving you the money to give to Guernsey to pay for servicing the airport debt. So, it's a bit of a strange circle.
Well, I'll tell you what. The only positivity is that money stays within the bailiwick.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But one thing that really concerns a lot of people, particularly based on the fact that last week's debate didn't happen, and it looks now as if we're going to sort of find that Guernsey Airport have got to get their extension sorted out, in theory, before the Alderney one goes ahead. I think it's getting really worrying, the state of that runway. And my question to you is, whose liability will it be for any crashes that take place due to runway defects?
It would be, I believe, Guernsey Ports, because they are responsible for the runway. And obviously they have very regular, I believe, again, weekly meetings or teams meetings with the CAA, which is the Civil Aviation Authority, UK,
the regulator,
license the runway. They have to report to them. So there is that. The checking of the runway is obviously taken incredibly seriously, and the meetings that take place, reporting goes back. And what concerns me about the rejection, if you like, or the delay rather of the runway debate, is that the CAA, I think they look at our runway in a sort of holistic manner. They know there's a problem, but they could see that on the horizon was rectification, i.e., either the option A, new runway for what it is, or extension. Now that potential more holistic view of the problem is going to be addressed has now perhaps been taken away. And so whether they start to take a different view, I don't know.
And am I right in thinking that in any case, if you go for C plus or whatever it is, it's not going to be finished until 2026. So we're going to have to put up with the current deteriorating state of the runway for another 4 years.
Well, so certainly during the build period, that's all that can happen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what you'd be saying is, well, let's put a temporary new runway in before we build a permanent new runway.
Yeah,
well,
which wouldn't make sense.
Doesn't work, does it? No.
But having said that, presumably they're going to have to give a bit more attention to the resurfacing of the existing bit. Otherwise, we are going to find that we're going to be out it. How do you see the situation if C plus goes ahead in terms of ATRs going to Southampton and all the rest of it? It does seem to some people that an awful lot of money would be expended for a couple of planes coming in a day, and we'd end up more or less with a bit of a ghost airport.
Well, again, what do you want? Do you want connectivity or not? And this is an answer. It's again, as in all, I suppose, infrastructure projects which are starting from set positions rather than a blank sheet of paper, it is not perfect.
Yeah.
But the running costs have been factored into the plan that's been put forward. And whether you talk about a ghost airport, one would hope that there would be more in the way of private flyers coming in. That doesn't make it as much of a ghost airport. But if it's a ghost airport and you have connectivity, I think people can bear that. If you have an airport but isn't a ghost but doesn't get you where you want, maybe that's not quite so acceptable.
Did you go to that Air Alderney presentation up at the airport?
Yes, it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I was quite impressed with that Medivac aircraft.
Yeah, look good. And as I say, as a dedicated aircraft, I mean, the only problem, and I talking to Mr. Brem, is it Danny?
Wilson, yeah.
I mean, it's an ideal solution on one respect to have a dedicated aircraft here. And I think when you were interviewing him and his colleague last week, he said there'd be 8 or 9 pilots up here as well, and so not a problem to have people always on call. The current way that HSC, the health service, work in Guernsey is that they send with the aircraft currently what they call a grab team of medics. So I'm not sure whether they would necessarily want to actually go ahead in the way that Mr. Brem Smith wants to. But that would be a negotiation that could take place. But it looked a good aircraft, and obviously in terms of its accessibility and that golden hour that was referred to.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's a concern, isn't it?
It is, but equally, we have to work with the medics, HSC, and we can't. If the people who are running the plane say we want to do it this way, and HSC say no, then I think we have to go with HSC, because safety and the welfare of the community has to be our top priority.
But I mean, is it true at the present time helicopters are having to be used at night if required?
I believe so, yes.
And they don't come cheap, do they?
No, they don't. And again, that's an HSC, or that comes as part of that Medivac deal.
Yeah. Okay. Right. We've talked about raising more money. It looks as if goods and services tax is going to happen. Should make the point that we're recording this interview on the 28th of November, so the policy letter hasn't quite come out. But how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it'd be deeply disappointing for Alderney in terms of the proportions of a salary or average wage salary that are spent on food and fuel are higher than Guernsey, and so that will be a potential higher impact GST on our community. I mean, the key thing though that is with GST is there's also a balancing of supplementary support for people on lower incomes. And arguably again, and some Guernsey deputies have made this point, that Alderney will benefit more greatly because you have more people on lower salaries and wages.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a false argument, but it does help. It will help.
It should offset some of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, people look at they don't look at their annual tax bill. They look at what they're actually paying for the shopping every week and everything else. And I mean, it's a good way to get money in quickly. But one thing that does I'd like clarification on: will Alderney directly benefit from any of the GST collected on the island?
I don't think so. Not directly. It's not.
So it's going to be like income tax and go straight into the Guernsey exchequer.
I think so. It's not. What's the term they use? Hypothecated, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
It's not actually going to come. The pound you spend on a I don't know, tin of beans or whatever GST on that doesn't stay here.
No.
It will go into the central pot. As to the levels of, I think we as a states will try to make the case very clearly that we're not, we feel that GST isn't appropriate for us, or it needs to be modified here. But whether that argument will be won, I'm not so certain.
Well, I'm sure if we went and said we didn't believe in income tax, they would come back and probably say, well, we do, and you've got to pay it, sunshine. But there we are.
I think one of the key areas that we're, again, slightly sceptical on is just the costs that Guernsey say it will cost to collect the tax. They've taken a model from Jersey that seems to be a very low figure, but that's we'll see what the policy letter actually says.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about 5 to 8%. I wouldn't have thought there's much margin in 5. I reckon it's going to cost 3% to collect. So it doesn't leave that much over, but there we are. Now, looking at the general financial situation, I mean, 2023, I don't think looks particularly happy in terms of property sales. Then there's likely to be a bit of a reduction in congee, I would have thought, during that period.
I think I wouldn't disagree with you. Although when we try to predict what would happen the following year, I mean, if we were sat here this time last year, we wouldn't have had any thought about a war in Central Europe and the Ukraine. So, there is that unpredictability about life. But I think you're being realistic.
Yeah.
Whatever the property, I won't use the word boom, but very positive property market over the last 2 years, I think will slow down.
Yeah.
And as you say, as a result, that tax take will decrease and decline. I don't think
you don't make assumptions on that, Ian. You're not assuming you're not assuming you're going to get X £1,000 in next year or anything.
No, absolutely no. We again, the sort of budgeting process assumed going back to the sort of 2019. If you like, what one might say was a more normal period of property buying and selling.
Yeah. Okay. Can we do a few quickies, because Mr. Zoom's telling me that we're getting a bit tight on time. The ambulance service, that's sorted out now, is it?
I think so. In terms of St John's, sort of formally will take over in January/February, the transition period. And so then I think we will have a stabilised ambulance service. I mean, that again is something in the rationale for having to set that negative budget this year was simply to make sure that we had both health and ambulance in place for the community.
Yeah, okay.
There was a very good sort of take up in terms of people applying for potential posts with St John's, and likewise the rollout of first responders. So I think there is that seems the reaction has been very positive.
Is that chargeable to the States of Alderney or the States of Guernsey?
States of Alderney, we're responsible for that.
Yeah, so you've got to find the funding for that. Yeah, okay. The new Connaught is over budget, I believe.
Well, certainly wasn't the last time that I was formally given.
Okay, well that's all right. I'm quite happy to accept what you say.
Yeah. No, I think Kevin Gentle, who's the States member on the project board, at the last people's meeting, again, he gave that assurance that currently they are in budget, and the end of Q2 2023 should be completion. So that's probably June.
Okay, that's fine. Torgy. Now, this has been going on for years and years and years. You, the states, have decided to cancel the arrangement with the Dutch people. What were the terms of the option? Was there a specific term in there?
Not that I was aware of. No.
Is it?
I mean, we're now being accused of not being, of actually taking a decision to prioritise something or deprioritise something. That's now a wrong decision, evidently. So you're hung if you do, hung if you don't. But from the advice we've had, there's no legal demand or potential on the states.
But I mean, normally with a development situation, the developer takes an option on the land, the property, or whatever, and you sort of say to him, right, you've got 5 years to get it sorted. At the end of the 5 years, the option agreement lapses, and in the meantime, the developer pays you a premium for the exclusivity of trying to sort the site out. It seems to me strange that the law officers didn't put a term in the first place.
I in true sort of civil service speak, I can neither confirm nor deny that. I just don't know. I'm afraid, Tony.
No. But you would agree that if you'd been dealing with it, you'd sort of say, well, we'll give them 5 years, and if they haven't sorted it within 5 years, we reset.
I certainly would have done that. But I think those who back, I think 2003 or 2008, who started this, there does seem to have been a little bit of drift,
naivety.
I
couldn't possibly comment.
But but as I say, as far as I've been led to understand that there's no form of sorry, I'm losing the word that I want here, but we're not under any obligation.
They can't come and get you. That's really what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. What about road resurfacing? We haven't seen any of that for a long time.
No, I think that's been sort of again conflated with the runway, because obviously you get the kit on the island. That's the most expensive part of doing any of this work, is the mobilisation part, and so always the contention was do the runway, do the roads at the same time. I think we've now got to, one of the challenges for GSC next year will be making that decision as to whether that needs to be brought forward, because if the runway in whatever form is not addressed.
Housing, anything happening on the old Connaught or Whitegates?
Well, the only thing I can say with the old Connaught is that in terms of it being able to be lived in, it cannot be lived in. I mean, it's not habitable.
Right.
As to again, and that's more of a GSC sort of taking that forward and just trying to decide how best to. And again, this sounds like a cop out to deal with it, but whether looking at selling it is always an option, or how you develop it with a developer, that again is another option which is being actively looked at.
Make it fit for purpose and get some rent in.
Possibly.
Okay. The marina, is that sunk?
No, the expressions of interest were sort of sought. They're being analysed by Guernsey procurement, and I believe supposedly, I think by the end of this month, so not too long, we should have at least a set of options that we can then consider. So
that's still live.
Yeah, it is, and it's not just marina. What people asked for was a consideration of the whole of the Bray Bay area, so that which would include a marina. So that's definitely very much live. Yeah.
Swimming pool?
No, not. I think that is still with this. I mean, I'm actually seeing the Director of Education this afternoon down at the school, and it's something that I will raise with him.
Yeah.
So currently, we're in the situation that there is some money's been put into the budget in terms of taking the concept plan that the Sports Foundation, the Alderney Sports Foundation, came up with, to a more secure and, if you like, costed what we could do, but nothing has actually been commissioned yet. But as I say, I'm speaking to the Director of Education this afternoon.
I mean, I have to say it's a tragedy that the school children have been deprived of a swimming pool for what, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that.
It is, but that, I'm afraid, unfortunately, is a situation we've found ourselves in.
Yeah. We'll round off with the Platsaline sewerage scheme. What's happening about that?
I think it's possible. Again, it's being progressed through GSC as best they can,
Right.
because obviously we're trying to live up to those ideals of not pumping raw sewage into the channel, just as Guernsey are as well. And in their states of deliberation on Friday, they were debating sewage there, and obviously we need to continue to try and ensure that we do our bit as well.
Yeah. I mean, it did seem to be a bit of a contradiction with the biodiversity debate of a few months ago that you're pumping raw sewage in 200 yards off a Ramsar site.
I quite agree with you that there's not a synergy there. No.
Ian, it's been a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for sparing me some time. Hopefully we'll be able to get together in the first quarter of next year and see how things are going at that point.
Well, you're making a supposition that I'll be continuous chair of PNF. Maybe who knows who you'll be speaking to.
I'll still have you on even if you're not.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Good to talk to you. Thank you so much. All the best.
Bye.